Good afternoon. Well, it's still morning, but good morning. And welcome to another edition of Mark's Inspiration. Today we're going to continue in the series of my book, Coming Back Home, The True Adventure of Mark Daniels. We are on chapter 5, but before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And welcome to my new subscribers. Thank you to my 1,360 subscribers, because if you weren't here, who would be listening to me? But you are. So, here we go. Chapter 5. A quick study. Summertime was a wonderful time for a boy. Excuse me. Since my dad was drunk or angry or both almost all the time, I made a habit of spending as little time as possible at home. Because of my newfound popularity due to my reputation as a young drinker, most days I could be found roaming the town with the neighborhood kids like a band of wild dogs. Or we would congregate in someone's yard and play army, flashlight tag, or football. Anything to keep us moving and in some form of competition or danger. One summer, some of us decided to go on a long bike ride through the state park. The plan was to ride 10 or 15 miles through the patchwork of hills and valleys to a big lake, then spend the day swimming. I was usually the leader of the pack, even though I was younger than the other boys, so I led the way on my 20-inch 3-speed buzz bike with a banana seat. Do some of you guys remember those? Maybe not. My younger crowd probably doesn't know what that is, but you can look it up on the internet. It was a hot day, and I was eager to get to the lake, so we were moving fast and paying little attention to our surroundings as we went. Everything was going fine until we got to this giant hill. We all hesitated at the top as we looked down the steep slope. Steepest hill around here. More like a mountain. Well, a mountain from Missouri, at least central Missouri. Then, the brash boy I had become, I started down first. I remember the other boys shouting things like, "Oh shit, here we go," and the like, when nothing. Or then nothing. The next thing I remember, I was waking up in the hospital with pain everywhere. And there was my mother. The first thing she said to me was it worth it? Not, "Are you okay?" I'm so glad you're not dead. Just a reminder that I was an idiot and had made another crucial error in judgment. She was okay. She was worried about me, I could tell. That was just their way of showing concern. So, with that being said, if your parents talk to you like that, they're doing the best they can. Their way of showing concern may seem demeaning to you, or that it's belittling for you, but it's just the way they've learned as they grew up. They did not have the opportunity that you and I have today with all this philosophical counseling tools and things like that available. People did not open up like they do now. So consider yourself fortunate instead of unfortunate that people are wiser about psychological things and the value of words than they were back then. Okay. My friends later told me the gory details. Right after I started down the hill, my bike went into a high-speed wobble. The steering wheel starts wobbling. The front tire caught a rock or a rut or something I hadn't seen, and the bike started flipping end over end. They said it flipped 3 times while I was somehow still on it, and each time I came back around, my head slammed into the ground. After the flipping, my body separated from the bike, and then came the rolling. I rolled all the way down the hill, beating everyone else to the bottom, and ended up in a creek. When they caught up, I was delirious, asking about the airplane crash. My head was bloodied and already starting to swell. My clothes were torn to ribbons, and skin was peeled off my side and my legs. I would say I was going about 45 miles an hour down that hill, because later on in my life, when I trained for triathlons, I would go down that hill on my 12-speed, I think. It was a 12-speed. And I would hit 50. I had a digital speedometer. So they kept dousing me with water from the creek to try to keep me awake while they went to find a park ranger. I was in the hospital for 2 days, and about the only thing I remembered besides waking up was really enjoying the Welch's grape juice and the doctor telling me that he couldn't believe I hadn't broken a single bone. Yeah, that was kind of a miracle. I was lucky to not be paralyzed, much less to have only a concussion and some road rash. Wreck rash they put here. I didn't get the edit on that. That's okay. That was the only time in my life I spent the night in the hospital. In that regard, I have been fortunate indeed, and yes, I have. My life-saving luck came in handy another night during a terrible storm. My dad had passed out drunk in his usual chair, and Pat and I were terrified. The storm just kept getting louder and louder, unlike anything we'd ever heard. We could feel the house shaking and hear the windows rattling in their frames. Then a tree fell and hit the house, and water and wind started coming in through a hole in the roof. We tried to wake Dad, but when he opened his eyes, he threatened to beat our asses if we didn't quit fighting. I guess he thought we were tearing the house up. I ran and opened the front door. It sounded like a freight train was going by. We ran down to the basement, and I think that was the first time I was less scared to be down there than in the rest of the house. We left my dad in his chair. The next day, we learned that a tornado had ripped through Troy and done a tremendous amount of damage. That was in October of 1969. It had crossed through our neighborhood and jumped our house, landing about 5 blocks away, where it destroyed the school bus barn and all of the approximately 30 buses inside. It would seem I had a guardian angel shielding me from danger. Now, some people would call that a traumatic experience that I would have to deal with. Maybe it is, but I just look at those things as like the bicycle wreck and then that deal with the tornado. Sure, I was afraid and it was scary, as I thought in a kid, but maybe I'm in denial. But trauma, I don't consider that trauma. I consider that part of life's experience of growing up. I mean, looking back, I'm glad I got the story to tell. Was it a horrible, terrible experience? I don't think so. But then again, maybe I'm in denial. Who knows? But I'm okay with it. Here we go. I would spend considerable effort testing the angel's fortitude. I had styled myself as a tough guy. At least I wanted to be. And I played the part well. One night during the winter, the boys and I thought it would be funny to throw snowballs at some young black men driving by. To our surprise, they stopped the car and chased us. They were much older, so I was scared to death. But then I remembered, I'm the tough guy. I stopped and turned around to face them as they came near, and they slowed, allowing my friends to get away. I thought for sure they were going to beat me up, but they just held me down and tried to scare me into telling them who else had been with me. I lied. I told them it was another neighborhood kid that none of us liked. Eventually, they let me go unscathed. I do remember that. Was that traumatic? I was afraid. I thought they were going to beat the crap out of me. Okay, in hindsight, I realized there might have been another reason they didn't beat me up. They were young black men, and I was a younger white kid in a small town, Missouri, in the early 70s. I think it might have been 69. As I grew and my blinders fell away with regards to the racism that was all around me growing up, I came to feel guilty for putting them in that situation. It would have been much more dangerous for them than me. Sitting here now, I'm glad nothing came of it. I actually went and found some of those boys, or tried to, and made amends to them for that. One of them passed away, but I was talking to, I think, a brother of one of those guys, and I did the best I could to make amends for that. And that's something that I don't do that for the other people. I do that for myself because things like that bother me. I didn't intentionally do that to hurt anybody, but if something bothers you, you need to clean up your side of the street. If they accept the apology or the amends, that's good. Doesn't matter. You're doing it for yourself. It reminds me of a memory that is only just now coming back to me as I write this. One day when I was about 9 or 10, I was walking back from the theater, and my path took me past the road to where the coloreds lived. That's what they called them back then, African Americans. That was the word we used back then. It is a horrible word, of course, but back then it was replacing an even more horrible word. The one that I also heard many times. Now I believe African American seems to be the most correct term. Although I have talked to some people of color, they like to be called blacks, and that's what I grew up with. I was the proper term, but I can use whatever word a person likes. It doesn't matter to me. I've been called a cracker, a honky. I don't care. Doesn't matter. To me, anyway. Okay. I have met older African American men who prefer to be called black and refer to us as white. I'm fine with calling anyone whatever they want to be called so long as there is respect behind it. I think that's far more important than the word. Anyway, I want to go off on a tangent about pronouns, but I won't do that. I'll stick to the book. Anyway, as I walked home that night, I was afraid because I was a young boy by myself in a bad part of town. It was only about a mile from my house, but at that age it seemed like quite a journey and came at a time when there was much tension between the two races. A bit like it is now if I think much about it, but it's much better now than it was then. As I walked by that particular street, I saw the town marshal dragging a handcuffed black man on the ground, yelling and beating him with a blackjack, trying to get him to stand up. It was the first time I had seen anything like that. As a child, images like that can color your whole perception of people. They can make you hate, for no other reason than because someone else hated. They can make you fear, for no other reason than unfamiliarity. It's important for parents to be the filter for young minds, to teach them that things aren't always as they seem. Laws aren't always written to protect every segment of society, and sometimes people are arrested for doing nothing more than trying to cope as best as they can with the life that those laws frame for them. That isn't their fault, but here we are. Excuse me. Yeah, times were hard enough back then. But if you have been a kid in my neighborhood, you might have believed it was my full-time job to make things even tougher, at least for myself. My friends and I loved to water balloon cars as they drove under a bridge near my house. One night, someone must have had enough and reported us. Now, you might think we would have ran when we saw the city marshal's car coming. That's certainly what we should have done, but what we did do was water balloon that marshal's car just like we had the rest. And then we doused the marshal as he was opening his door. Cliston Hilton was his name, I remember him. He was a big guy. I guess we figured it served him right for driving under the bridge rather than over it. That was a long night. Several police cars were patrolling the neighborhood, waiting for us to poke our heads out of whatever hole we had found to hide in. The marshal had apparently seen my face and knew who I was by reputation. We saw a police car park at my house, and the officer spoke to my dad, then walked back to his car and drove off. We were hiding in a cluster of bushes just down the street. Waiting, I always assumed my dad must have figured out what happened and told them we were at home the whole time or some other lie to keep us out of trouble. He never said a word about it. As far as I can remember, I never asked him. I wish I had. After the police car left, the entire stakeout broke and we were able to go home and sleep. That's really strange. I always thought my dad thought of him as the terrible disciplinarian, and if I did anything wrong, he was going to punish me severely. Now, he knew what was going on that night, but he never said a word to us. I'd never understood that. And let me tell you this, my dad's passed away in 2012, and I never asked him about that, and I don't know why. I would like to know, and if he were here today, I would ask him. It's funny or curious how we don't think of these things while the people are living, but when they pass away. I never asked Mom and Dad how they met. Never asked them that, never thought about it when they were living. But I wish I had asked them because I would like to know. So if your parents are living today and there's things you want to know, they may not answer, but at least ask them, because one day they may not be here and you will always wonder. And the problem too is all their friends are older and passed away, or they don't remember, or they don't know. So You may have questions that you will never get answers to unless you ask them while your parents are living. And if they don't answer, at least you asked. So you don't have to wonder, what if I would have asked? But that's all we're going to read today. We're on chapter 6. That will be the next series, Freedom of a Kind. And we will continue on. Thanks for joining me, and I'll talk to you later. Take care.